Stand on the walls of York today, and you are standing on the precipice of time itself. Beneath your feet lies not just stone, but the solidified echo of Roman discipline watching over a wild frontier. Walk the shambles, and you tread a path laid by Viking conquerors. These aren't just cobblestones. They are the spinal cord of a city that breathed commerce and conquest long before the concept of England existed. Touch the Minster's limestone. You are making contact with a prayer in stone that took 2.5 centuries to utter. A testament to a faith that demanded generations of sweat and blood to manifest. This city is a graveyard of empires. Emperors breathed their last within these walls, and kings used this northern fortress as the anvil upon which the very concept of English power was hammered into shape. Armies besieged it. The Black Death ravaged it. The Luftwaffe bombed it. Yet York refused to die. It is a survivor, wearing its scars not as wounds, but as architectural medals of honor. We are about to breach the barrier of time. Using neural rendering, we strip away the dust of centuries-old engravings to reveal the visceral, breathing reality of the past that has been hidden until now. This is not a lecture. It is a resurrection. You will not just learn about York's history. You will witness the mud, the stench, the noise, and the glory, exactly as it appeared to those who lived and died here. 30 minutes, 2,000 years. The entire lifespan of a civilization compressed into a single narrative arc. This is the biography of the eternal city of the North. Let us begin. Let us rewind the clock. Let us return to the Genesis. Before the Minster, before the Vikings, there was only the strategic ambition of an empire that knew no bounds and feared no frontier. 71 AD, the 9th Legion, Hispana. 5,000 men marching into the unknown, pushing deep into hostile territory, carrying the eagle of Rome to the very edge of the known world. They halt at the precise geometric intersection of the Ouse and the Fosse. This wasn't a random campsite. It was a calculated stranglehold on the north, a hydraulic lock on the region's transport arteries. The earth is broken. Timber walls rise first, a temporary scar on the landscape that would soon calcify into stone. They named it Eboracum, a word that sounded like the place of yew trees, but meant military dominance. The 9th Legion didn't just build a base, they engineered a machine for living. 5,000 veterans, men who had marched across the known world, now turning the clay of Yorkshire into a replica of Rome. Civilization is imported in the form of hypercausts and steam. They built bathhouses to wash away the barbarian mud, and temples to gods who must have seemed very far away under these grey, weeping skies. Then, the historical record falls silent. The 9th Legion, 5,000 souls, evaporates into the mist of the early 120 seconds. No great battle recorded, no mass grave found. Just gone. Nature abhors a vacuum, and Rome abhors a weakness. The 6th Legion arrives to fill the void. They would not leave for 3 centuries, turning a frontier outpost into a permanent anchor of imperial gravity. Eboracum evolves. It sheds its skin as a mere camp. A city grows around the soldiers, a parasite that became a partner. It is no longer just a place to fight. It is becoming a place to rule. 211 AD. The center of the world shifts to Yorkshire. Emperor Septimius Severus enters the city. He is the master of the Mediterranean, but here he is just an old man, shivering in the northern damp. He came to conquer the Scots, but the climate conquered him. In a stone chamber in York, the man who ruled millions draws his final, rattling breath. The empire's heart stopped beating in Rome and stopped here. His son, Caracalla, stands on these walls. He declares York, the capital of Britannia, inferior. Half of Britain is now ruled not from London, but from this fortress. York has become the Rome of the North. 306 AD. Another emperor dies in York, but this death is not an ending. It is the spark of a revolution. Constantius is gone, and the eyes of the army turn instantly to his son. In a moment of military coup that would rewrite history, the legions proclaim Constantine emperor right here. Not in Rome, not in Constantinople, but on the muddy banks of the Ouse. Constantine doesn't just rule, he transforms. He is the pivot point. He takes an empire drowning in pagan blood and pulls it toward the cross. He legalizes Christianity, ending centuries of persecution. He moves the capital to the east, to Constantinople. The geopolitical axis of the world shifts, but it was set in motion by a decision made in York. Western civilization pivots on this single man. Today, he sits in bronze outside the minster, sword broken, gazing at the world he changed. A silent sentinel reminding us that York was once the launchpad for global power. By 314, the transformation is physical. York sends a bishop to the Council of Arles. The military fortress has become a spiritual stronghold. Christianity isn't just tolerated, it is becoming the establishment. For a moment, Eboracum is the perfect fusion of faith and imperial might. A city of stone, law, and order. But empires, like men, are mortal. The rot begins not from without, but from within. 410 AD, the order comes to withdraw. The legions leave. The protection evaporates. The greatest empire the world had ever known simply turns out the lights and goes home. York doesn't vanish, but it breaks. The stone is cannibalized. The straight roads disappear under mud. The heating systems fail. The lights of civilization flicker and die. But people remain, scavenging in the ruins of giants, wondering where the masters went. They wait in the darkness for the next wave of conquerors. And they are coming. The Anglo-Saxons didn't conquer a city, they inherited a skeleton. They moved into the ribcage of the Roman fortress, patching stone with timber, renaming Eboracum to Eoforwic. For 2 centuries, the city hibernates. It adapts. It becomes a place of wood and wool, breathing quietly in the shadow of the giants who came before. Until a king walks in. 627 AD, Easter Day. King Edwin of Northumbria, a man who spent his life trusting cold steel, now stands before a small wooden church, ready to submit to something intangible. He bends the knee. The water of baptism touches a king's brow. It seems a small moment, but it is the seed from which a cathedral and a Christian nation will grow. When kings convert, kingdoms follow. That wooden hut is the embryo of the York Minster. The city transforms again from a warrior's camp into the spiritual epicenter of the north. By 735, York is no longer subordinate, it is an archbishopric. England now has 2 lungs, Canterbury in the south, York in the north. The balance of spiritual power is struck. But York's greatest export wasn't wool or stone, it was a mind, Alcuin. In these cloisters, he built a library that became the envy of Europe, a lighthouse in the so-called Dark Ages. Scholars crossed oceans to study here. While the rest of Europe struggled in the mud, York was preserving the intellectual heritage of the West. It was the golden age of learning. So profound was this wisdom that Charlemagne himself plucked Alcuin from York to educate his own empire. The mind of Europe was shaped by a teacher from Yorkshire. York kept the lamp of knowledge burning, but across the North Sea, other lights were flickering. Cold, hungry eyes were watching the wealth of the monasteries, and they were building ships. They came from the sea, not as traders, but as a wolf pack, the great heathen army, Danish and Norwegian warriors, who had heard whispers of gold and weakness in the English kingdoms. November 866, they strike before the sun rises. The longships glide up the ooze like predators. The Anglo-Saxon defenders wake up to the sound of wood splintering and the smell of smoke. The city falls by nightfall. Eoforwic is dead. In its ashes, a new beast is born. They rename it Jorvik. And they don't just occupy it, they colonize it. This wasn't a raid, it was a renovation. Viking families arrive. They dig deep, building sunken floored houses, laying out a city that smells of timber, tar, and ambition. Jorvik explodes into a metropolis of 10,000 souls. It becomes the Hong Kong of the Viking world, a trade hub connecting Dublin to Samarkand. The city hums with foreign tongues and new wealth. They mint their own coins here, stamping their authority in silver. They are craftsmen, jewelers, bone carvers. The violence of the invasion gives way to the industry of the settler. But Viking rule is a knife's edge. Kings rise and fall with the tide. The last of them has a name that echoes through history like a curse. Eric Bloodaxe, a name earned in gore. 954 AD. Eric is betrayed and butchered on a lonely moor at Stainmoor. With his death, the independent Viking kingdom of York is extinguished forever. The city returns to the English fold, but the Viking DNA is already woven into the brick and blood of the place. York breathes a sigh of relief, thinking the worst is over. But peace is a fragile interlude. The year is 1066, the year that will break England. 3 wolves are circling the throne, and York is the bait that will draw the first blood. The first blow comes from the north. The Norwegians land. They want to reclaim the lost kingdom of Jorvik. They think England is weak. They are wrong. King Harold Godwinson marches north. At Stamford Bridge, just outside the city, he meets the Viking horde. In a day of butchery, he crushes them. The Viking Age in England ends here, in a river of blood. Harold celebrates in York. He has saved the north. He is the hero of the hour. The wine flows, the wounds abound, but history allows him no rest. The doors burst open, a messenger, mud-spattered and gasping. The news is a hammer blow. William of Normandy has landed in the south. The nightmare has a second front. He has to march again, immediately. 200 miles in 4 days. An army of ghosts walking to their own funeral. He leaves York, never to return. Harold dies at Hastings. William the Conqueror rides north. He looks at York not with affection, but with strategic paranoia. He sees a city that needs to be broken. His order is simple. Build me a cage for these people. The foundations of York Castle are dug. A Norman boot stamped onto the neck of the Anglo-Scandinavian city. But the North has a long memory and a short temper. In 1069, they rebel. They storm the castle, slaughtering the Norman garrison. For a brief, glorious moment, York is free. The narrator speaks. William's response is not war, it is extermination. He unleashes the harrying of the North, a campaign of systematic destruction that would stain his soul forever. From York to Durham, they burn every village, every barn, every seed. They salt the earth. People starve in the thousands. It is a medieval apocalypse, and York is ground zero. William rebuilds York Castle, and this time, there will be no rebellion. The message is carved in stone. Defy me, and I will turn your world to ash. The North is pacified by the sword, but life is stubborn. Slowly, painfully, York recovers. Trade resumes. The resilience of the city asserts itself against the desolation. The wounds of the harrying begin to scar over. The Minster begins its transformation. From a timber Anglo-Saxon church to a stone Norman cathedral, a statement of permanence rising from the scorched earth, a promise that God has not abandoned this place. And York gains something unexpected, a saint. In 1153, Archbishop William returns after years of exile. The city turns out in such numbers to welcome him that the very infrastructure groans under their weight. Disaster strikes. The timber of Ouse Bridge snaps. Hundreds are hurled into the freezing river below. It should have been a tragedy of mass drowning, a black day for the city. And then, the miracle. Not a single person dies. It is seen as divine intervention. William's tomb in the Minster becomes a pilgrimage destination, drawing the faithful and their coin from across England. But 1190 brings a horror that stains York's history to this day. As England prepares for the Third Crusade, a wave of anti-Jewish violence erupts, fueled by debt and religious hysteria. The Jewish community seeks refuge in Clifford's Tower. For days, the mob besieges them, demanding conversion or death. Inside, the air grows thin and hope runs out. On the night of March 16th, facing certain massacre, many choose to die by their own hand. They set the tower ablaze, choosing the fire over the mob. A Masada in Yorkshire. Those who came out hoping for mercy were murdered anyway. Around 150 people died that night. The exact number is lost to history, but the shame remains etched into the soil of the castle mound. 1212 AD. King John, a monarch desperate for allies and cash, makes a deal. He grants York the power of self-governance. It is a transaction, not a gift, but it changes everything. York becomes a city-state within a kingdom. It collects its own taxes, judges its own criminals. It is no longer just a subject of the crown. It is a partner in the business of England, and business is booming. The source of this power is grazing on the hillsides. Wool. English wool is the oil of the Middle Ages, and York is the pipeline that feeds it to Europe. With wealth comes influence. The city grows fat on the fleece of sheep. Merchants build guild halls that rival palaces. York is flexing its muscles, ready for the national stage. 1298. King Edward Longshanks arrives. He brings more than a retinue. He brings the entire machinery of the English government. The treasury, the exchequer, the law courts all moved north. For 6 years, York is the de facto capital of England. If you want to petition the king or pay your taxes, you don't go to London, you come here. Edward is obsessed with crushing Scotland, but proximity to war has a price. In 1319, the Scots don't just wait to be conquered, they raid south. They come right to the gates of York, burning the suburbs, taunting the capital of the north. Yet, the city also sees joy. In 1328, the Minster hosts a royal wedding. Edward III marries Philippa of Hainault. For a moment, the grim fortress becomes a fairy tale setting for the flower of European nobility. York is at its zenith, wealthy, powerful, a royal favorite. It seems invincible. But history has a cruel sense of timing. The ships that bring wool to Europe are about to bring something else back. 1349. The ships that brought wealth now bring an invisible assassin. The Black Death arrives. It doesn't storm the walls. It creeps in on the backs of rats, silent and deadly. It moves from house to house with terrifying speed. There is no cure, only prayer, and prayer goes unanswered. The death carts rattle over the cobblestones, unable to keep pace with the harvest. Half the city dies. The silence is deafening. Workshops stand empty, tools gathering dust. The economic engine of the north seizes up, choked by the sheer scale of the mortality. But cities are resilient organisms. It takes decades, but the pulse returns. Survivors inherit the world of the dead. York rebuilds, but the trauma is woven into its genetic memory. 1405. The plague has passed, but the political fever rises. Archbishop Richard Scrope stands in the Minster. He dares to preach rebellion against King Henry IV, citing corruption and tyranny. The king's response is swift and brutal. He ignores the sanctity of the church. Scrope is arrested, tried in a kangaroo court, and beheaded. The shockwave travels across Christendom. You can kill a man, but you cannot kill a martyr. Scrope's tomb becomes a shrine. The king has won the battle, but lost the heart of the city. York simmers with resentment. Resentment boils over into civil war. The Wars of the Roses, cousin against cousin. The House of Lancaster versus the House of York. A dynastic suicide pact that will bleed England dry. For York, the choice is simple. They back their own. When the Yorkist kings Edward IV and later Richard III enter the city, they are greeted not as conquerors, but as favourite sons. Especially Richard III. History paints him as a monster, but York knew him as a patron. He lowered taxes, he listened to grievances. To this city, he was a hero, not a villain. 1485. Bosworth Field. The sun sets on the House of York. Richard is hacked down in the mud. The last English king to die in battle. The White Rose is trampled. A new dynasty rises, the Tudors. For York, this is not a liberation, it is a defeat. They watch the Red Rose fly over their walls with sullen silence. The north is out of favour. Enter Cardinal Wolsey, Archbishop of York, but he rarely visits. He is the second King of England, a man of immense power and appetite, ruling from the shadows of the throne. But in the court of Henry VIII, failure is fatal. Wolsey cannot deliver the king's divorce. He is stripped of power, summoned north to die in disgrace, a warning to all. 1536. The north explodes, the pilgrimage of grace. 40,000 men march to defend their monasteries, their faith, their way of life, against the king's Reformation. Henry promises pardon, then delivers death. He crushes the rebellion with psychopathic fury. The leaders are strung up from York's walls, rotting warnings to a rebellious city. The monasteries are dissolved. St. Mary's Abbey, the jewel of the north, is gutted. Its roof stripped for lead, its stone stolen. The spiritual heart of the city is ripped out. Faith goes underground. In the shambles, behind false walls and under floorboards, the old religion survives in whispers. It is a time of spies, secrets, and terror. Margaret Clitheroe, a butcher's wife. She hides priests. When caught, she refuses to plead. Knowing a trial would force her children to testify against her, she chooses silence. The law is brutal. She is pressed to death, a sharp stone under her back, a heavy door upon her chest. She dies in agony to protect her family, a martyr in a city of ghosts. 1644. The wheel turns again. Civil war. King Charles I against Parliament. York chooses the king, becoming the royalist capital of the north. It is a choice that will bring fire to its gates. The parliamentarian armies surround the city. For 11 weeks, York is a prison. Food runs out. The walls are pounded by cannon fire. The city holds its breath, waiting for salvation. Salvation arrives, then turns to slaughter. At Marston Moor, just outside the city, the largest battle ever fought on English soil erupts. The royalist army is annihilated. 4,000 men die in a single evening. The cream of the royalist forces lies rotting in the Yorkshire mud. York surrenders. The king's cause in the north is dead, but peace returns. The 18th century brings a new mask for the city: Georgian elegance. York reinvents itself as a social playground for the northern gentry, a place of balls, races, and fashion. 1739. The Knavesmire. A notorious thief named Dick Turpin climbs the ladder. He isn't the romantic hero of legend. He is a thug, a murderer, facing the end of his rope. The crowd cheers as he swings. In Georgian York, death is a spectator sport. The legend of the ride to York was a fiction invented later. The reality was a cold drop on a windy moor. 1745. The ghosts of the past return. Bonnie Prince Charlie marches south. The Jacobites. For a moment, it looks like the Stuarts might reclaim the throne. Panic grips the city, but the rebellion fails. The price is paid at Micklegate Bar. The heads of the rebels are spiked above the gate, a medieval warning in an age of enlightenment. The old brutality is never far away. Yet, the city smooths over the cracks. The blood is washed away. York becomes a museum of itself, a polite society living in the shell of a warrior's fortress, until the steam engine screams. 1829. The threat comes from within. Jonathan Martin, a man driven by religious madness, hides in the minster after evensong. He believes God wants him to cleanse the temple with fire. He piles prayer books and cushions like kindling. A single spark grows into an inferno. The medieval choir stalls, carved by masters centuries ago, become fuel for his delusion. The roof collapses. Molten lead pours from the gargoyles. The heart of the cathedral is gutted. Martin is caught and declared insane, but the scar on the building remains. 1839. A different kind of fire arrives. Steam. The railway. George Hudson, the railway king, turns York into the hub of the north. The ancient walls are breached not by armies, but by tracks. The city explodes outward. Population doubles, then triples. London is suddenly hours away, not days. York is dragged, kicking and screaming into the industrial age. 1942, the Baedeker Raids. Hitler orders the Luftwaffe to target Britain's cultural jewels. York is chosen not for its factories, but for its beauty. It is cultural assassination. The Guildhall, standing since the 15th century, is obliterated in seconds. Incendiary bombs rain down like a fiery hail. The city is burning again, just as it did under William the Conqueror. The Minster is hit, but this time, the people fight back. Volunteer firefighters scramble onto the roof in the middle of the raid, kicking the firebombs off before they can take hold. Dawn breaks over a smoking city. 92 dead, hundreds homeless. But look up. The Minster stands, scorched, shaken, but standing. The symbol of the city refuses to fall. Even nature tries to claim it. In 1984, lightning strikes. The South Transept burns again. Some called it an act of God. York just called it another Tuesday. They rebuilt it. Again. The 20th century brings a new kind of fortress. A fortress of the mind. The University of York rises. Concrete and glass, replacing stone and timber. The city returns to its roots as a center of learning, echoing Alcuin's legacy. The iron horses that transformed the world find their final stable here, the National Railway Museum. York acknowledges that while it was built by Romans, it was modernized by engineers. But the biggest discovery lies beneath a shopping center, Coppergate. Archaeologists peel back the concrete and find Jorvik, perfectly preserved in the wet, anaerobic mud. The Vikings are still here. They don't just put the artifacts in glass cases, they rebuild the world. The Jorvik Viking Center opens. We come face to face with our ancestors, smelling their smoke, hearing their voices. Yet, the ancient enemy remains. The water, the rivers that brought the Romans and the Vikings now threaten to drown the city. Floods rise with terrifying regularity, a reminder that nature cannot be fully conquered. The shambles, once a street of blood and butchers, now a pilgrimage for dreamers and tourists. The history is packaged and sold, but the magic is real. The stones remember the footsteps of millions. They say York is the most haunted city in Europe. Perhaps it is. When you have this much history, this much death, and this much life layered in one place, the echoes never truly fade. High above, the work never stops. The Minster is a living creature that constantly sheds its skin. Modern masons use medieval tools, replacing the stone block by block, keeping the prayer alive. But York is not a museum. It is a city of science, of chocolate, of digital innovation. It honors its ghosts, but it does not live in the past. It evolves, just as it did for the Romans and the Vikings. So, stand on these walls again. Look out. You are not just seeing a city, you are seeing a timeline. A 2,000-year-old conversation between stone, water, and the human spirit. York is not just a place, it is a palimpsest, layer upon layer of ambition, blood, and faith, written on the same patch of earth. To understand York is to understand the history of England itself. It is a city that refused to die. When the legions left, it adapted. When the Vikings burned it, it rebuilt. When the bombs fell, it stood firm. Resilience is the mortar that holds these stones together. The river keeps flowing, indifferent to the kings and commoners who have come and gone. But the city remembers them all. Every ghost, every saint, every sinner. This is York, the eternal city of the North, a guardian of history, standing watch over the past, ready to face whatever the future brings. History is not over. It is being written right now, and you are now part of its story.